Good evening. Thank you all. I apologize for the delay. My 7-month-old was not interested in our schedule. My apologies. Let's go ahead and get started. Can you do roll call?
Tanya Booty.
Here.
Kelper.
Here.
Yes. And then Kirk.
Here. All right.
And just a friendly reminder to speak into the microphones.
The Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of the November 5th, 2018 Finance Committee meeting be approved as presented.
Second.
Tanya Booty.
Yes.
Kelper.
Yes.
Yes. And I just wanted to make a note that if we can move the 3 of 4 discussion items and talk about transportation before student fees.
Gotcha. Okay. So before that, however, is the FY20 budget calendar. Did you all have any comments that you wanted to make around that?
By law, we are required to adopt a budget, a calendar for next budget, and draft calendar for FY20 budget is attached in the packet.
Thank you. Did you all have any comments or questions?
Nope.
No. And I believe we do need to.
Anya, can you use
I'm
microphone,
sorry. I believe
please?
we do need to vote on that.
Is it approval? Or-
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The Finance Committee recommends presenting the draft FY20 budget calendar to the full board for adoption.
Second.
Tanya Booty.
Yes.
Kirk.
Yes.
Kelper.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So we're going to move on to the FY20 transportation fees.
District 65 provides transportation to students attending TWE, magnet schools, and ACC programs. These fees are determined annually, and by district's policy, 2/3 of those costs are paid by the families. According to our calculations, the full cost this year is $790, and 2/3 of the cost is $529, which is a $15 increase from last year, approximately 3%. Reduced fee for the students paying reduced lunch fee is $158. Attachment B includes calculations of that fee, including what the district gets from the state. This year, it's only going to be $26,000, so that amount has dropped. Our costs for the approximately 700 students are about $570,000, and if we deduct all what we collect from the students and the reimbursement from the state, the district is still subsidizing approximately $463,000 of those costs. And we have Mr. Lugata with us to answer questions about transportation.
I had a question.
Yes.
My understanding is that if someone has a permissive transfer, that they are responsible for the busing fees. However, if someone is transferred as a result of a necessary program being unavailable at their neighborhood school, are they still required to cover busing fees?
I believe they're not.
No.
Use the mic.
They will not be responsible as long as we're the ones who initiate the transfer request. They will not be responsible for.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And also students who are free lunch, they are exempt from those fees as well.
And I also want to point out that children who live in hazardous routes or who live beyond the mile and a half, they also don't pay for transportation.
Okay.
Quick question. Thank you. My understanding was before, and I could be way off base with this, I feel like if there was problems with the bus, that if the bus was late, if there was something, wasn't there some type of penalty that the bus company accrued that like does that affect these fees? How does that work?
It's hard to calculate fees based on what the bus company may or may not pay in penalties. So that doesn't go into the calculation.
Okay, but there is a penalty.
Yes, there is a penalty for lateness.
Is there
to the
a
bus
record-keeping
company.
system that the schools have for that?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm just not aware. and I just-
Page 42 and 43, John, actually documents the late fees that we collect from the bus
Oh, great.
company.
Okay. Thank you, just
And-
curious.
No, it's a great question. And it's also, it's interesting to watch over time how much the lateness has decreased.
Right, I remember
If we went back to fiscal 16 or fiscal 15, we had a tremendous amount of late fees, and that's when we actually, tremendous amount of late buses, and that's when we started to really be adamant about collecting fees.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? The Finance Committee recommends presenting the 2019-20 transportation fee to the full board for approval.
Second.
Tanya Rudy,
Yes.
Parsa,
Yes.
Alpern,
Yes, and since you're here, Lou, transporting so many hundreds of kids safely and efficiently every day is a huge logistical task, so thank you.
Especially when it snows.
Are we still moving on, or
Yeah.
are we holding on? Okay. All right, and so we're gonna move on to FY '20 student fees. Should I read the first? The Finance Committee recommends presenting the FY '20 student fees to the full board for approval, and then I'll turn it over to you, Offer.
So student fees are also determined every year. They include general student fee, which covers the cost of consumables and lunchroom supervision, classroom activity fees. Those fees are transferred directly to our schools and cover things like magazine subscription, teachers and students' supplies, and technology fee. And last year, we did not increase any of the fees. This year, we are only proposing to increase technology fee, primarily because our cost increased dramatically. This year, we implemented one-to-one program to middle schools. The amount of repairs, also our equipment cost and subscription, software subscription cost went up. So we are proposing an $8 increase in technology fee, going from 32 to 40. And for students receiving reduced lunch, going from $9 to 12, so it's a $3 increase. That increase would generate approximately $40,000 for the district. Another change that we are doing, and this is not a new fee, is we will be billing iPad insurance fees with the student fees. And this fee is an optional. It's not mandatory fee, it's optional, but it's actually a big savings for families, because in case an iPad breaks, instead of paying $150 for repair, they can just pay $40 for that insurance and have that covered. Now, Another thing that's done, and it's actually a cost reduction for families, this year, iPad insurance was $40 for full fee students and reduced. So it was the same amount. Next year, what we are proposing to keep our fees, basically have them the same way, is to reduced fee to $12. So go down from 40 to 12. And again, they're going to be billed earlier, but we are trying to work with technology department and streamline the process. So if a family decides to go on RefTrack and just click on their fees at once, they will have that option. But again, it's optional, so if they feel they can take a chance with that iPad and they don't want to do it, there is their choice. So there is, you have two tables in the memo that basically compares the fees, and you can see that for full lunch students, it's just an $8 increase, and for reduced lunch students, it's a $3 increase.
Are the iPads loaned or are they purchased?
They're leased.
They're leased?
They're
Okay.
leased.
And you had Lindsay, you had a question about, did you get an answer to that question about
Which one?
the insurance rate and over time?
Right. But it sounds like the insurance is optional, that parents
Yes.
can opt out of it. So that was the question, so
Got it.
that's,
Okay.
that answers that for me. Thank you for checking.
I'm curious, for the iPads that we distributed this year, were parents given an option for this year, the same, and it was included as part of their fee? Or how
It
was
was billed separately. That's why we feel that billing it at the same time will be a lot more convenient, because there's a lot of record keeping right now. Parents have to go in separately, find their special button on RefTrack. So I think it's a lot more confusing. So I bet just billing it at the same time will
But
simplify
was
the
it
process.
optional?
It was, yes, it was optional.
year?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, the thinking behind it, it's just a way to protect our families. Because the cost of buying an iPad, instead of if it's stolen, if it's broken, instead of just going out and coming up with money to go buy a new iPad, if they buy the insurance, then they don't have to worry about the replacement cost. The deductible from the insurance will take care of it.
Do we have information on what percentage of iPads need to be repaired by month-ish? I mean, you know how many devices are out there?
We can get you that information. We don't have it right off the top of our
I mean, I again, trying to stay in my lane here, but I know from experience having technology in the building, it breaks all the time.
Yeah.
Incidental dropping out of a backpack, it would be helpful to match that with the need for insurance and to what you're talking about. Because I'm sure with 1,000 devices, there's X number of breakages a month.
What would be different is that this year is the first time we're actually rolling it out at the rate that we're rolling it out, where all the middle school students actually get an iPad. In the past, the quantity that we gave out was much more limited. So this will actually be the first year, at the end of this year will be the first year we'll actually have data that we'll be able to share that will reflect that.
And it'll probably be something people get used to over time, and it won't be new anymore. It'll just be what it is. A question for probably a future board meeting. Kathy, you referenced higher subscription fees for probably digital material for the iPads. My question is, are we adding things to the curriculum load that we're now paying for digitally, or are we replacing what maybe was a textbook with an ebook and we're paying for that? Like, is it the same pocket of money that we're now spending elsewhere, or are we actually spending more money, new money, on things because we're subscribing to things in addition to, and do we have enough time and space for all those new things, or are we just loading up the iPads with high interest stuff and maybe we don't need all that? That's a
Same thing, we will get the information from
technology, and Stacy can address that as well.
I figured that.
It's a
It's
great question.
combination of many of these, but we'll get the answer.
Okay.
And just to be clear, are there any cost savings in going into the digital world of using applications versus adding more applications, and how expensive is that?
Right.
I know one thing that is related to that we spend more money on are the wireless hubs, because we have to upgrade the wireless hubs in our
bandwidth,
schools
yeah.
to be able to allow all those iPads to be able to go online at the same time. I know during the summer, we spent some money upgrading that, the IT department did.
Awesome. And do we have hotspots? This is now technology conversation.
Yes.
Do we have hotspots that we loan out to children to take to their homes? Mobile hotspots?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I can look into that and get back to you on that.
Well, the library does.
I know the library does, but
does,
if we're going to
right.
require kids to have digital tools and then digital assignments, it would make sense that we would want them to have a hotspot when they need it to take home.
I'll find out
Okay.
from IT, get that information to you.
Thank you.
I'm also curious in how we communicate to families fees. I was expecting student fees because I'm on the board and we've talked about it before, but I don't recall during kindergarten registration getting a kind of a flyer or anything that said these are all the additional fees that you want to be prepared to cover. And I think that if we don't, we should think about how we're giving folks the heads up so that they can budget for these fees, particularly if they have multiple children, it starts to add up.
Yeah.
Just, you know, like letting fifth graders who are transitioning to the middle school know that there's an additional student fee that's going to be coming up, and letting folks at kindergarten registration know this is what transportation costs, this is what our technology fees, et cetera, are. Just so folks can get ready.
Yeah, we will have those updated fees for the kindergarten registration. And then, of course, will be updated on our website and in our communications with the parents.
So indeed, we'll have the information, but you're asking a great question, and it's a good push for us, which is how do we make sure that we disseminate the information and make sure that a family coming in to register, a family transitioning into middle school actually knows, and we can be, what you're asking is spot on. Let's be proactive about that.
Yeah. I think just, you know, some of us have to budget for the cost.
Yeah.
What about the families that turn down the iPads? Do they still have to pay the increased fee, or do we discount that for families that refuse to, that don't want the iPad?
Currently, I'm not aware of that. I can talk to curriculum and instruction and find out if we have such family and how many of them do we have and how we handle that.
Okay.
But my best guess here, this is a guess, so we'll come back at the former board meeting, is that this is a fee not only for the iPads, but technology writ large. So my guess is the answer is yes, they would have to pay the fee going forward as part of the general fees of the district.
Right, it says here, in addition to the fee above, the 6th and 7th grade students are required to pay the iPad insurance fee.
Yeah, so we have technology
so
fee, and
there's-
then we have the iPad insurance fee. So the
The
iPad
iPad
insurance fee
insurance
is
fee is not
optional.
required. I think
Right,
it's
it's
just,
optional.
it's
Right.
mischaracterized in the.
But everyone pays the technology fee.
Technology, yeah.
That's what you
Even if they
asked.
turn down the iPad?
Yeah, because
Yes.
it's for
Yeah.
other technology.
The technology fee was actually something we instituted several years ago before the one-to-one program. So like Paul said, it isn't specifically for the iPad. It is to cover increased technology use across the
It
district.
includes technology infrastructure that we provide in the classroom. So it's not just the iPad, it's whatever technology infrastructure that the district pays for. For example, lease payment, for example, wireless ArtPoint, those kinds of things are paid for. Partially, they're supplemented by small amount with those technology fees.
Okay. So it's two separate fees. So there's the increased technology fee, and then there's the optional insurance that we're offering families
Yes.
for
That's right.
That's right. For the individual iPads.
Yep.
And students that qualify for free lunch, they don't have to pay an insurance fee? Do they get it automatically, or do they still have to register for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then my other question was, earlier we were talking about the increased subscriptions, the one-to-one, all these programs that caused the need for this increased technology fee. Does that 40,000 cover the increases that we've accrued over the last year, or is that less? Is it more? Like, do we kind of have an idea? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's trying to catch up to where it actually costs us, but it's still not quite meeting the needs of what we've increased over the last.
It just supplements it.
Okay.
It really doesn't get close to it.
Okay. Thank you.
So I apologize for being late. I'm not sure if this was already addressed, but my question that I sent over the weekend was regarding the distinction between free and reduced lunch students, and how my concern over reduced lunch families still being obligated to pay the fees, and then even still, there are probably families that don't qualify for reduced lunch, but still have financial hardship that probably can't easily afford the fees. So I just wanted to understand the breakdown there, and if there's ever been a thought to move to a less federally mandated route with fees.
To address the question, there's actually a process available for families who are struggling, who may not qualify for free, may qualify for reduced, but is still having a financial problem. There's a hardship waiver process that they can apply for, where they can provide the information about circumstances that makes it difficult for them to be able to pay the fees. And if it's granted, then they don't have to pay anything.
That seems like it's probably more administrative work and a lot of onus on individuals that are experiencing hardship.
I'll be very frank in saying that the line has to be drawn in deciding folks who choose not to pay, they can pay,
Sure.
and folks who truly cannot pay. If we don't have a process in place, what is going to happen is we'll find out the majority of folks just wouldn't pay because they don't have to. So it's a hard decision that we have to make in making sure that we separate folks who can pay and folks who don't want to pay.
The other thing in your question, it's an interesting question. The federal proxy is what we use for people at or below the poverty line, and that's been established. If we didn't have that as the proxy, what would be the proxy? And I worry, as we've talked about this, I worry that that would be even more bureaucratically burdensome. I mean, we'd have to have people show some proof of income level or status that one shouldn't necessarily be our interest or our, and just in terms of processing that. And so again, from past practice and in a way of determining this, the free and the reduced lunch provides us with that without an extra burden to the family or an extra burden to our staff.
Appreciate that.
And I mean, we're not going to ask people for their income tax forms. I mean, that's in some ways none of our business. But we will. I mean, the proxy that we get through the federal qualifications gives us an opportunity to address the needs for people who have great needs.
But it also, I mean, we've had this conversation in a different pocket of finances around school lunches.
Yeah.
And I think the broader question for me, which is the same one Lindsay's asking, is where, obviously there has to be a line somewhere. And then we trust in the gray space for teachers and social workers and staff to be in touch with families, that when people are advocating explicitly or implicitly that they have a need, that there's some humane way of supporting families to get school tools and resources, but also take care of people. But are there also those same mechanisms to make sure that someone's not being shamed or not given the school tool they need because of money? And is there, do the school teams feel like they have the tools to administer the line, but also bend appropriately? Do they have the space to do that for families when families ask? And there's school lunch for that, there's technology, there's the immunization schedule, right? There's a host of things that school has to tackle with to do that. So that, I guess that's a broader question. I don't know where we talk about that.
Very valid point.
At risk of going down a rabbit hole, but just to go down there for a minute, as it relates to the free lunches, the school lunches, we're no longer doing the complimentary lunches and the what would be sort of a, if I may, a shameful soy butter and jelly sandwich. So everybody's eating, and we made that transition last year, and we're working on how we actually. For those who haven't been able to or haven't paid or don't want to pay for their lunches, we are working on a billing process, and we send regular balances to folks who haven't paid, but we're not restricting lunch and the regular lunch from children.
Right. But on the first day of 6th grade, everybody gets their shiny new iPad, or is it everybody gets their iPad if they've paid, right? And again, don't need an answer today, but the question is there an element there to make sure that a tool that we expect our students to have made available, do they get that? And how do we bridge the financial piece, which has to be tended to also? I'm not saying we shouldn't tend to it, but making sure that, again, I don't qualify for free and reduced lunch, but I also can't shell out the money for the iPad today, and therefore my child is being sent to school to not get what everybody else is getting because of something that it's just a question of how that happens, because it's in every building.
And I wonder if we also need to have a broader conversation about the federal standard of what's considered financial hardship versus what may be financial hardship given the cost of living in our locality, in order to be fair to all of our families. And in terms of the administrative lift, I think we should have the conversation about like what that would be, and do we think that is the trade-off worthwhile, given how much is determined by those lines and how much that may impact, how many people that may impact if those lines moved. I don't know. I'm seeing heads nodding, so I'm thinking maybe we need to have a broader conversation down the line.
I think it would be an interesting conversation. I'd like to put it up on the list of priorities of other things, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the assumptions of the federal calculations, but I think I'd like to look at all the things that we have to bring forward at the Finance Committee and ask, is that the highest priority? We can obviously spend time doing that work.
Okay. Well, let's discuss it more, and we can talk about what that lift looks like and what the trade-offs for that might be, and if we want to make that.
And what the timeline for that
And
discussion
right, how long it would, right.
I do have just one quick question. Again, for fear of like going down a rabbit hole, because I think we could probably talk about this for a while, but just looking at the FYI memo on fee collection thus far for the year, or as of October, does this generally track where we are at this time per year? It seems low to me, but I don't have the historical record.
So yeah, it's actually, it looks the way it should be, because a majority of the fees for the year were collected in June. And now the next big billing will be sent in June. So right now we are finishing up of collection of prior year fees. We also sending activity fees to schools. So that's why you see a very small percentage. But again, last year we actually went over the budget, and if you were to look at a collection in early months, it was very small. What I can do, I can add maybe prior months and see if that's going to be helpful.
No, I don't think you have to change I was just, just
But
if you
that's
knew
very
offhand.
typical.
But this is typical then, like for,
Yes,
like, so speaking of the technology fee, it's saying here the percentage collected so far is 34%. So for this point of view, that isn't collected upfront at the start of the school year?
Yes, so what we do, we bill general and student activity and transportation fee in June for this
Right.
year, and that's when we get the bulk of the money. And then we collect basically what's left,
Right.
and then the next big billing is in May, due in June. So we're gonna get a lot of fees in June.
For the 18-19 school year.
Actually, the fees are for FY '20, because we are always behind, we are always 1 year behind, the way we collect.
I don't think I understand that.
I mean, we collect for the fees in advance, basically. For some.
Right, so we
not for
only
tra-
have 34% of the 18-19 fees collected, of the 18-19
And
technology
again,
fees collected?
it's not,
Go back and ask the question one more time.
So,
Please.
the way I'm reading this memo is that we only have 34% of the
of the budget.
18-19 technology fees collected thus far.
The budget
that-
is a combination of the FY '19 and FY '20 fees.
Oh. Because part of it is coming, okay, I think
Yes, yeah, that's why it's kind of complicated,
Okay.
because we really started collecting FY '19 fees last year. That's when the bulk of them
I see what you're saying.
came. So it's a
So it
combination,
was,
kind of like the
okay.
tax levy.
I think I get
Yeah.
what you're saying. But the bottom line is, these percentages are normal
They're
for this
normal.
point of the
They
year.
are
There's
normal.
nothing, okay.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
only fee of those fees that is for this fiscal year are childcare fees.
Childcare, and that's the year is obviously still
Everything
ongoing,
else,
so.
it's a combination of FY '19 plus the future. That's why the proposed
Got
fees
it.
that you see
Thank you.
are for FY '20.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Because we have to get ready for the kindergarten
Right.
registration and for
Right.
our next billing to
Okay.
have them ready.
Thank you for that.
So, I'm sorry, do families have the opportunity to pay in installments?
Yes.
Are they aware of that, or is that, I mean, I know we send bills out. Okay.
Yes, and we communicate with families every single month. We bill every month, and there's always a memo attached with various ways of paying, including RavTrack, and we communicate that there is ability of having a payment plan. And even a waiver. If someone has a financial hardship or is struggling, there is a process there's a form to fill out, and they can apply for the waiver.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions or comments about student fees? Okay.
Just again, to reiterate the observation, and John, your last question parallels what Anya was asking, which is, how do we communicate all this stuff? And I think that's a good question for us to come back at some point to talk about how we communicate when parents register, when they get, when they know that they can pay in installments, all that sort of stuff. So we can come back and have a more clear explanation of how we're actually engaging our families on the fees that we're charging. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Here? No.
We're voting
Sorry.
on moving
Oh,
the student
yes.
fees.
Here and
Yes.
Tanya Goody?
Yes. All right. That wraps up our agenda for the finance meeting this evening. So I adjourn this meeting at 6:46. Thank you all.